we have a special free resource for you. Just follow the link in the video description. Today, we're exploring one of the biggest differences between a technically correct architectural visualization and one that truly feels alive: believable people, movement, and everyday life. And when the scale gets bigger, that challenge gets bigger too. From adding a few people to an interior to bringing entire public spaces, crowds, and traffic to life. So, our first question: why do so many architectural visualizations feel empty, even when the architecture itself is pretty much excellent?
Well, I think that very often it comes down to the lack of human scale and activity because the architecture may be great and looks amazing, but if we don't have people in that space, it feels like something like a ghost space. For example, if we have a huge building and there is nobody in that building, it immediately feels like the abandoned buildings from the movies. But when we populate that building with people, the effect immediately change. So it helps on one hand to perceive the right human scale, but on the other hand, it helps us a lot to feel emotionally attached to that place. Because in the movies, when we see, as I mentioned, those empty streets and buildings, immediately we make the connection to that, like abandoned space from dystopian movies. But on the other hand, if we have people who are going to work, people who are talking on their cell phones, or maybe kids playing around and things like that, immediately we feel that this place is alive, this place is populated, this place is something where we can be and we can imagine ourselves.
And do you think that really helps with telling the story and communicating the design intent?
Yeah, definitely. On one hand, it can help us to present how the space is intended to be used, but on the other hand, it can tell the story, the storytelling of the building or the space. Of course, if we're talking about very small, like living room, one people can be added. But what about if we have a huge retail space or a building surrounded by streets? We need those people walking on the sidewalk, or we need those cars driving around on the streets, those traffic lights as well, and all those things. They will tell the story, and that they will help us to establish that emotional connection with the viewer of the image or the animation. Especially if we talk about animations, from my experience working with clients, if we have a huge animation of a space and if we have square or streets, almost always, the client will ask to have people who are walking on the sidewalk, the cars, because these things will bring life to the image, to the animation in that case.
Now, you mentioned like larger spaces, like a public space, a master plan, a stadium, urban environment, whatever. How do you populate those places with, because let's face it, it's very different from populating a room or an interior
Yeah.
in that sense, right? You need like hundreds of people, even thousands of people, vehicles, and there's traffic, and like, how do you do it?
Well, at that scale, populating it manually will be a daunting process and a time consuming process. Thousands of people or cars, it's almost impossible to do that in a reasonable amount of time. In those cases, we need something that can help us to populate with crowds of people and a lot of different cars on the street. And Anima helps me a lot in those cases because there are great tools over there to control how the cars are moving, to move naturally on those streets, and to place traffic lights, crosswalks. People will wait for the cars, for the green light, and all those things. And this is the best way to populate huge spaces. Another thing I could mention right here is that we need not only to control all these people and cars in a logical way, but also to have those accurate movements. We don't want the people to move clumsy, like, in a strange way. And Anima helps me here a lot because in Anima people are very well animated and they walk in a very natural way.
And one thing that has always caught my attention with anime is that, like, when you have a traffic light, for example, when you have people crossing the streets, the cars will stop for
Yeah,
the people will stop for the cars. When you have like unleveled surfaces, for example, you have stairs or something, people will actually like climb the stairs and everything. That would be like impossible really to do by hand if you think about
yeah,
it.
no way.
But that also looks like a very complicated thing to do, like even with the proper tool. So let's say someone has never used Anima before. What's the fastest way they can make their scenes feel more believable and immersive in that sense, like to create something that feels truly alive?
Well, from my perspective, probably the first thing that they can do is to just drop animated people. It's really easy and really fast. Just drag and drop, to be honest, and they will walk and move around. On the other hand, the first time I saw Anima, I was thinking that it will be very complicated, but it's not. Actually, it's very intuitive, and we can easily place where we want the people to move, and the crosswalks is it's definitely not so complicated as it sounds on the first glimpse.
That's great. So, guys, if you're watching this, make sure to try Anima. Make sure to check the link in the description for your prize, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, Ivan. Cheers.
Thank you.